In today's talk, I'd like to share my recent project on the Chinese knowledge workers' emotional experiences with social technology platforms. This project is funded by the research grant, internal research grant called Communication Media Culture Studies funding scheme from our School of Communication at HKBU. So I'm very happy that I can share some of my findings from doing this project. So let's begin. Well, we all know that social technology platforms, so if we define them, are those integrated platforms that bring employees an all-in-one place, kind of a user experience where they do their work every day. And in my interviews, I want to begin today's talk by sharing with one of the quotes and very interesting example from one of the interviewees. I think it becomes really common nowadays that our everyday life, everyday work is infused with those social technologies. So as this interviewee described, from the second I open my eyes in the morning to the last minute before I go to bed, I'm on DingTalk. DingTalk, by the way, is one of the most famous social technology platforms for enterprises. So I found this very interesting video. Actually, it's just an edited video displaying the sounds, well, according to all those interviews we have, very annoying sounds of notifications of incoming messages from DingTalk, which becomes one of the bad words on the internet. And someone edited a non-stop ding sound on this website. So let's just listen to it and maybe sort of get a feeling about what it's like when you work on DingTalk. So let me share this screen now. So this is one of the videos on Bilibili, so a very famous video sharing and knowledge sharing website. And someone edited the notification sound from DingTalk and have this endless 1 hour loop of those notification sounds. So let's just listen to it a little bit. All right, so, well, I think I will just mute it for a while. From all those danmu, all those bearish kind of comments from these viewers, you can see how people feel really disturbed about those incoming notifications sounded by DingTalk. And this is just simply one example that how social technology platforms can basically bring annoying experience or maybe some emotional reactions to employees. So that sort of triggered my research interest in this topic. So I wanted to understand how those design and all the uses and the norms and the culture we're in are shaping our emotional experiences of using DingTalk and similar applications. So social technology, we define it as an integrated design of services or platforms that can include enterprise social media, instant messaging platforms, and content managing functions. From this iResearch report, well, you can see that in China, mainland China mostly, we have some leading platforms like DingTalk, Feishu, and WeCom. So WeCom is a platform developed by WeChat, so specifically for employees to facilitate their work communication and coordination. But of course, there are other platforms or services that are adopted, but these three are the leading platforms. And from the last 3 years, well, due to the pandemic, many workplaces are moving digital coordinations and moving to digital platforms to facilitate employees' work, teleworking or remote working or work from home. So from this recent report from the CNIC, China Internet Development, you can see that, well, basically the user base of all those online platforms have reached to 0.4 billion. So it's a really large group of people, large group of employees, a population who are using those social platforms nowadays in the Chinese societies. Well, basically, if we look at research about social technology and knowledge work, because in this study, I focus on knowledge work or knowledge workers, those who also known as the white collar workers, or those employees who are sitting in front of the computers or laptops, or doing their work using lots of mobile phones for content creation, knowledge sharing. So if we look at research about how social technology are shaping the knowledge work, we can find two perspectives. One is using a so-called utility perspective that is focusing on developing the cognitive models that try to explain how the uses of social technologies can bring impact on knowledge management. So for instance, one of the key concepts in this utility perspective is called communication visibility, that looks at how a communication is made visible by using those social technologies that can contribute to the so-called meta-knowledge. So meta-knowledge is the knowledge about who knows whom and who knows what. So the relational dynamics and the expertise in organizations. So when we're working on those social technologies, we can see ongoing conversations of employees, our coworkers, and also we can understand our coworkers' expertise by looking at, for instance, their profiles, their engagement of projects. So, it's just a quite an innovative design that can bring communication that is otherwise not available offline, online. So basically making communication more visible in organizations. Another perspective is called socio-technological perspective that looks at how contextual factors can influence social technology uses. Well, so again, if we look at communication visibility, we may find that, well, for the same design that can enable communication visibility in different contexts, especially in different social and cultural contexts, employees may have different experiences. For instance, this recent study from Fu and Cooper found that communication visibility in a politically restrictive environment in China will basically bring challenges to those nonprofit organizations. So on one hand, they can leverage on the communication visibility to have more influence, to let more people to know them. However, the very act of making themselves visible in the social environments basically may bring some risks, because they have no idea, or they're not sure whether, as nonprofit organizations, where they're striving for some social causes, and whether such behavior will be accepted or will be okay to the so-called central government, or in this political environment that is relatively more restrictive. So as we can see, the socio-technological perspective give us more opportunities to look at sort of the nuances of the uses of social technologies. So in that case, well, in this project I'm sharing today, I adopted this socio-technological perspective to look at how knowledge workers are using the social technology platforms. And because I focus on emotional experiences, this kind of a socio-technological perspective will be more beneficial, because emotion, well, according to one stream in emotional research, is also socially constructed. Well, for instance, if we think about happiness, happiness in the Chinese context might not be necessarily the same as how people define happiness in the US. Well, in the Chinese context or in the Asian context, happiness can be defined, for instance, by achievements or by how we can influence others, whereas in other contexts or cultures, happiness can be defined as self-exploration or inner kind of exploration, or the processes, well, that can lead to people to feel happy. So, well, I believe that this socio-technological perspective can give us more contextual understanding of employees' emotional experiences while they're using the social technologies at work. So in terms of workplace emotion, well, it's not a new topic. It's been a topic for a while, for several decades. However, if we look at the development of studies on the workplace emotion, we can find that, well, some early work that focused on employee emotions really primarily looking at these employees that are regulated to behave certain emotions, or so in organizational context or in some occupations, some kinds of work or occupations would require some emotional display. Well, that basically is the focus in one of the seminal works in workplace emotion. So Huang's work on the managed heart, looking at the so-called emotional labor. Well, basically through the analysis about the so-called display rules of emotions of flight attendants and the bill collectors. Well, she argued that in organizations, in some occupations, workplace emotions are regulated, and basically employers regulate their employees' display rules of emotions because that kind of emotion is commodified. Well, it means that, well, by displaying this kind of emotion, for instance, a flight attendant smiling to passengers or the ground staff in the airport, showing a very calm and patient attitudes and emotional display, can basically ease the interactions between the employee and the clients or other people in different contexts. So early research focused on, we could say, service workers, because for those service workers, they are facing the clients and consumers. So they have to maintain certain level of positive emotion or kind of emotion so that they can basically make their work done. So this is the early focus of workplace emotion, focusing on service workers and so-called emotional labor, a kind of a processes prescribed by employers about the display rules of employees. However, if we look at, well, knowledge workers, for knowledge workers, well, we believe them as those who are just sitting in front of the laptops and working, with the mobile phones. Probably we think that knowledge workers are cool-headed, rationality-based profession. Well, that actually is probably the reason that scholars looking at social technology uses and knowledge work primarily focuses on how knowledge can be produced based on the uses of social technologies. Well, scholars have yet to look at how emotion can play a part in the emotional work, in the knowledge work. Also because, well, in contemporary workplace, we are more interdependent. Employees work together, so collaborate and coordinate their everyday activities to achieve certain job tasks. And also management as well as other organizational study literatures and industry reports highlight the importance of developing positive workplace relationships among employees. So, well, in our everyday work, we deal with others, we interact with others. So emotions can arise due to those kind of interactions. And then coordination and collaboration, well, in essence, is a social process. So that sort of points to the importance of understanding the workplace emotion for knowledge workers. So then when I look at the literature, when I look back about existing studies about workplace emotion, I found that Catherine Miller proposed a relatively more comprehensive framework by understanding the kinds of workplace emotions employees have. So in addition to the emotional labor, so as I just described, emotions prescribed by organizations and commodified as part of work roles, well, she found that in the discussion and in the sharing of employees' everyday work experience, well, there are 4 additional kinds of workplace emotions. One is called emotional work. So emotional work means those authentic emotions inherent in some work roles. So for instance, teachers, musicians, and social workers, they display their emotions, and part of their job involves lots of emotion, dealing with emotions. And emotion with work. So emotion with work highlights the kinds of emotion induced by workplace relationships. So as I just said, Coordination, collaboration is a social process. Well, we develop relationships with our coworkers because of the increasingly interdependence among coworkers nowadays in the workplace. So, well, we find that, well, in the workplace, we have, for instance, energized interactions with our coworkers during conflicts. We have also cheerful emotional exchanges when we are celebrating achievements. And we also provide social support to each other during the difficult times. And these are all we call emotion with work. And the fourth type is called emotion at work. So emotions triggered by non-work related matters. So that's also increasingly possible nowadays. For instance, we are using social media for work, especially if you blur the boundary between your work and the personal circles. When you are working, you gather messages from your family members, from your friends, right? So it's quite typical that while we're working in front of a computer, we are chatting with our friends in those small groups, right? So discussing where we can go for a drink after work, or some interesting or even some very negative news that we see. So emotion at work describes this kind of emotion triggered by non-work related matters at work. And finally, emotion toward work. Well, emotion toward work is also a very frequent topic in existing studies that looks at how so the affect in the employees' evaluation, well, of their work. So for instance, job satisfaction includes this positive evaluation and positive emotions the employee have with your work. And then attitudes, if we evaluate employees' attitudes toward coworkers and companies and occupations, we also find that they have such affect. So I like my job, I like my colleagues, I like working as, for instance, as a professor. So, and then finally, burnout also taps into this emotion toward work. Burnout sort of describes this feeling employee have, the negative feeling about their work and the feeling that they could not sustain a kind of a productivity at work. So informed by Catherine Miller's this typology of workplace emotions, I tend to, in this project, look at employees' emotions when they are using social technologies more comprehensively. So not only just looking at emotional labor, but also other kinds of workplace emotions. So also, if we look at emotions and technology studies, we find that scholars, when they are looking at the adoption of ICTs in the workplace, ICT means information and communication technologies, employees also have emotional experiences. However, most research focuses on adoption. So when a new technology is adopted in organizations, how employee would have certain kinds of emotional responses. Well, just to think about, for instance, our university just migrated from Google Drive and all those Google products to Microsoft. So well, when we are adopting Microsoft, those platforms and products, well, we have emotional reactions. And previous studies suggested at least the three possible pathways or three possible factors that can lead to employees' emotional reactions to ICT adoption. So instrumentality, symbolic meanings, and aesthetics. So instrumentality means the functionality of the technologies. So the technological failure could lead to very, resistant uses or negative evaluations of from employees about the technology. So the malfunctionality or the poor performance of those social technologies, can possibly lead to certain negative experiences and negative emotions. We also attach meanings to social technologies. So for instance, if we look at more general context in our personal relationship context, well, studies find that we attach meanings, we establish meanings, we make meanings of those technologies. For instance, QQ is attached to certain generational kind of emotional attachment to this technology, right? So those people who grew up, who are post 80s in China will have this fond memory of using QQ to chat with friends. However, nowadays, young people post-90s, post-00 may not have such attachment. Well, that's because for QQ is not only a tool for communication for post-80s, but also represents a kind of emotional attachment, or that to help them to recall those fond memories when they grew up. And finally, aesthetics. Well, of course, poor design in terms of the interface can lead to negative evaluation about the technologies, and also can influence how employees work. Well, if you look at, for instance, this example, just a random web page, a poor design of web page with really ugly colors and kind of unfortunate, inappropriate arrangements of elements on this interface, well, you may feel that this is not that usable, right? And then when you're using it, you don't feel happy and you feel maybe frustrated about this poor aesthetic design of this technology. Well, so that kind of this line of research looking at emotional responses of employees to the adoption of ICTs give us some hints about how when knowledge workers are using social technologies for work, how they could have certain kind of emotional experiences. So furthermore, if we look at the advancement of social technologies, we can find that they bring distinctive opportunities for employees and can also be related to employees' workplace emotions. For instance, well, these technologies evolved so rapidly to incorporate various kinds of cues and emotional experiences. Well, although in a relatively cue-filtered out environment where we don't have the ability to exchange nonverbal cues, our smile or gestures or tones, well, social technologies provide lots of complementary functions where we can exchange emotions. For instance, stickers and the so-called paralinguistic affordances like likes or maybe some emotional reactions from those buttons will help us to express our emotions. The environment of the social technologies, especially what I mentioned earlier about the visibility of employees' behavior, can contribute to their emotional displays. So for instance, Tian Xiaoli, a professor from University of Hong Kong, conducted studies by looking at how employees use WeChat for work, found that employees are under this permanent observation from their superiors and coworkers to perform compliance and obedience. And she said this is a kind of effective labor employees are engaging in nowadays when they are under the so-called surveillance enabled by the visibility of technologies, because superiors can now check who gives or does not give a like or does not respond a message in a WeChat group. So giving and receiving like will basically facilitate kind of a workplace kind of emotional display. And then WeChat, such kind of visibility design facilitates the permanent observability of employee emotional displays. So further strengthening the power hierarchy, because superiors usually want to know or check out frequently about who gives or does not give the likes or responses in WeChat groups. So, and then another point I want to make about this advancement of social technologies is about how this smart designs can play a part when we want to understand employees' emotional experiences on those platforms. So, well, basically existing literature point out two kinds of ways to think about the intelligent design and its impact. One is called human AI communication. So looking at how social technology is becoming more intelligent and then become a source of information and a source where employees can interact with. So we have, for instance, those robots in those social technology platforms where they can collect information or to gather or to interact with employees for information or knowledge management. That could possibly bring emotional experiences, because not only real human beings are interacting with employees now, machines are also interacting with employees. So that should be considered when we look at emotional experiences. The second one is called AI-mediated communication. So defined as AI-based social technology or kind of agents that can represent someone and engage in workplace interactions. So for instance, a recent study looking at those scheduling tools, so those products developed for helping employees to schedule meetings with others, well, they use AI, so sort of as a robot or as a kind of a tool that can give information about the person who wants to schedule a meeting with another one. And then, well, basically AI stand in between these two kind of people, people who want to schedule a meeting and a people that is give the information about the meeting. So AI moderated the content and provide information to the people who want to schedule this meeting. And then in their study, they found that through this kind of AI-mediated communication, employees have emotional feelings as well when they are having interactions with AI-assisted scheduling tools. And usually when they, for instance, these tools are having failures or maybe have repetitive schedulings or overlaps in scheduling, so making mistakes, well, people may blame the people who use the tool. So not only the tool itself, but also people who use the tool. So, well, suggesting a kind of a spillover effect from the technology to the user of the technology. Well, these studies provide insights looking at the advancement, especially the smart design of technologies. How can they shape the emotional experiences as well for employees? So based on that, well, in this study, I tried to answer two questions. One, what emotions do Chinese employees, especially knowledge workers, experience when they use social technology platforms for work? And second, how are the emotions shaped by the social and technological dynamics in the Chinese context? So what I did is that, so with the great help from a team of researchers. So here I would like to especially thank to those people who are involved in this interview project. I'd like to name those people. So Xiong Zuquan, Gao Yuekun, Luo Yijun, Wang Yan, Huang Jiangling, Chen Lihua, Luo Lijun, Yan Kun, and Ma Haonan. So they participated in this interview project in class and outside of my classes to conduct interviews with Chinese knowledge workers from China, so mainland China and Hong Kong. And basically, it's individual semi-structured interviews that we conducted. So those interviews ranged from 40 to 100 minutes. And in total, we have 51, and there are 30 women and 21 men. And those interviewees, well, came from different places like super cities in China, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and other cities, first tier and second tier cities. So I won't read them now, but you can see that from the slides, and 18 from Hong Kong. So in total, well, we have basically a very large corpus of interviews, and because they are all transcribed. So we have 700.5 single-spaced pages with so many words for data analysis. Well, basically, I spent a long time analyzing the data. I use this research method informed from the grounded theory approach. So constant comparison method by looking at these employees' emotional experiences while they are using social technologies, and I compare experiences among those interviewees. And then I go back and forth from the data and then my analysis to basically have a more comprehensive understanding to answer the two research questions. So I won't go to the details of this data analysis process, but if you have any questions, I would like to answer them in the Q&A session. So now the findings. So what I found is, well, actually employees expressed and communicated in their interviews about three kinds of emotions they experienced when they are using social technologies for work. So one is about emotion toward work, another one is emotional labor, and the third one is emotions with work. Well, these findings actually point to or suggest some distinctive experiences that are not captured in the previous studies, and also point to the influence of the social and the technological context in the Chinese societies. So let's go to the details of these three kinds of emotions expressed by the interviewees. So one is about emotional toward work. Well, basically the user experience of those social technologies, well, mainly from the interviewees is through mobile phones. So they basically, as I introduced in the beginning of my presentation, when they open their eyes and before they go to bed, in their whole day of work, they are on their mobile phones and of course on their laptops and computers. So from these taps and clicks, they feel emotions. And this emotion are related to two things. One is the interface and performance of the platforms. As I just mentioned earlier, the instrumentality of a technology can induce emotions of employees. Well, for instance, this ding talk sound, well, to some of my interviewees, well, they were quite annoying. And from this quote, the notification sound is deafening during especially our meetings or when I want to focus on my task. It's everywhere, how disturbing it is. And also employees shared that they are limited, for instance, by the computing and also the interface capacities that could also bring in some emotional reactions. So while working on the mobile phones, the interviewees often found themselves bombarded by the flood of incoming messages. And usually if they're working on their mobile phones, they're limited by the screen sizes. So this university lecturer shared that I could only see 9 threads of ongoing conversations. It's really pressing. When he saw all those incoming messages, it creates a feeling of urgency. So he said, I don't even want to open it. It gives me a sense that I have to deal with them really quickly. So that creates this feeling of stress to this university lecturer. And also relate to the interface and performance, I found this so-called spillover effects of the interface and performance of the platforms. So for instance, the poor design or the poor choices of the social technology platforms, well, usually will be attributed to the inconsiderate and indifferent attitudes of organizations or employers to their employees. So an accountant, S39, shared how he felt about the poor functionality of the apps his organizations adopted. Well, he said, we have internal applications for communication and other kinds of work-related procedures, such as reimbursement. Well, but I never use them because there are too many limits. I cannot adjust the photos I took for reimbursement when they upload for reimbursement. And this year, they have downloaded 3 applications for workplace safety training and confidentiality protocol learning. So he was disgusted by the poor design of these applications and shared that, well, it means his organization as superior are just stupid. So this emotional feeling is experienced, well, not only just towards the interface and the performance of the platforms, but also spilled over to the feeling of the employers. So the second aspect of this emotional toward work is from this kind of a recent advancement of those social technology platforms, especially about the metrics. So, well, basically so scholars conceptualize that digital technologies basically bring 3 Ds. One is the digitization, so make something that usually on print or offline, online, and digitalization, so the way that we work become digitalized, and identification. So now we do not only see the insights from the quantified quantified insights of employees' behavior, but also we attach meanings to it. So, well, these metrics give insights about employees' behaviors. For instance, this screen capture from DingTalk is a weekly summary that is sent to every user describing how many messages and phone calls are dealt with by employees on this platform. So, well, on the one hand, the users and the interviewees who saw this kind of metric felt a sense of achievement. So for instance, one interviewee told me that, okay, so there's a very significant increase of the number of messages replied compared to what she did last week. So she felt that she really achieved a lot. She really, attended so many things at work during the past week. However, at the same time, they struggle to find the meaning of those metrics. Well, just share, as this sharing from S33, an e-commerce marketing executive, well, she articulated that these metrics make me feel that I'm part of a pipeline. They calculated how many documents I send, how many chops I put on them, and how many products I package. They quantify your work, but I don't get anything meaningful from them. So, well, basically they have this ambivalent feeling towards these metrics, and I call them, well, that basically result in a feeling of unhappy achievers. So on one hand, they seem to achieve a lot, but on the other hand, they struggle to find the meanings, make them to feel that they are not really happy about those achievements because they are not related to something tangible they achieve at work. Well, so this is the second aspect that's related to the emotional toward work. All right, so moving on to the second aspect of employees' emotions. Well, similarly as the studies from these service workers that emotional labor is required, well, for knowledge workers, I found that those digital technology, the social media platforms, actually will enhanced or exacerbated kind of this emotional labor. And sometimes even the emotional labor is inevitable online when they're using those technologies. They, of course, can easily perform emotional labor. Well, that is because those tools that is offered by the social technologies can help employees to easily express emotions, to give a like or to give a thumb up. However, they feel that they are trapped in this emotional labor online because of some of the features of technologies. So now I will go to details. So the employees, they shared that their social media presence should always be positive, and they should highlight the hardworking attitudes, pleasant emotions, and show gratefulness in their organizations. Well, these platforms offer a so-called exhibition space. So I borrow the concept from Bernie Huang here that conceptualize social media as an exhibition space, but not just a performance space where you can see there's accumulation of past activities and also self-presentation related content. So, well, this exhibition space have another implication that the performance or the behaviors of employees can be viewed or reviewed by various audiences, so such as coworkers, clients, and other stakeholders, and even, of course, people from their social circles. So this sharing from a high school teacher highlighted how self-branding on WeChat, especially using positive energy and showing hardworking attitudes, can be really useful. So she said, my colleagues post happy moments on WeChat. For one thing, they draw the attention of their parents, but more importantly, the positive content would help your parents' trust, making work easier. They also help superiors understand more about that person. They may feel that this teacher has much potential, shows passion for teaching, and is worth promoting. So you can see how this preserved content on social media, especially this kind of display of positive emotion, can become really useful. And this can be useful for many aspects of the employee's work. Well, on the other hand, employees criticized this kind of easy online emotional labor preservation or the exhibition of this positive emotional labor because they found themselves constantly engaging in this performance of emotions on social technology platforms. Well, especially during these online groups. employees found themselves in a so-called performance culture, 在一个表演文化, so where they engaged in lots of online emotional labor. They might not require the emotional labor. So by the definition or by the requirement of this occupation, you don't have to actually show, for instance, always the positive emotions in front of the coworkers or employees, because it's not commodified, not like those service workers. However, in these online work groups, they find lots of experience of emotional labor. They have this obligation that they need to contribute to an online work environment, especially giving positive energy, 传递正能量. So they feel that, well, yeah, so in the online environment, it's a very positive environment and we have lots of positive energy exchange, but they call themselves robots of giving those likes and thumbs ups, and an emotionalist machine giving likes, and an automatic worker to hold up the positive vibe of the company. So that means that they detach the real feelings and the feelings they express in those online groups. And that basically is captured in the early studies of the service workers' emotional labor, that is called surface acting. So online, those knowledge workers also are engaged in lots of surface acting so that they can contribute to the so-called positive vibe that they think is really important, that have to be maintained in online groups. Also, employees shared that they also have collective efforts offline and online to maintain such positive vibe and create positive energy and remove negative energy. Well, they pointed to the importance of persistence of online group chats. Well, they said in online groups, all those chat histories and emotional displays are preserved. So basically, superiors, managers can check out who give positive responses and who did not. So there's no way to escape from the performance of such emotional labor. Also, they mentioned the reason of doing that, or the way that they do it, is following this kind of a mindset called maintaining stability, 维稳. So, well, they said in organizations, for instance, employees would encourage each other to not to say something uncivil, unfriendly, and hostile in the work groups. And especially when they see the negative messages in chat groups, they even go to the colleague offline to ask them to withdraw or to recall the message or not to post something similar and more in the future. And then even in the space where it's supposed to be for venting, supposed to be for employees to share their real feelings or their experiences or their opinions or their voices to the upper management, it is also kind of moderated to only include positive content. So for instance, this data analyst shared that in his organization, there's a tree hollow, 一个树洞. So it's supposed to be an anonymous space for employee voices. However, well, what he found is that his comments, he shared the comments about how the food from the canteen of the company were so poor, and then how he saw someone smoking in the toilet, which is forbidden in organizations. Well, such sharing was censored. Well, basically, she could not post those negative things there. And eventually what he saw is a positive and something minor about these organizations, like how delicious the food in the canteen is and how positive, what kinds of achievements are there. So basically those supposedly voice sharing platforms or space, anonymous space, are also kind of moderated to only include positive comment. And that also is an example of the mindset of maintaining stability, because he said, well, if we have so many negative things online, these things are preserved there, people can see that from time to time, it does not create a positive vibe, and people's kind of a productivity and ways of working might be disturbed. So the persistence of those online group chats will really make it difficult for employees to show their real emotions, and they engage in those emotional labor, well, constantly. So finally, the third aspect is called emotional feelings or feeling emotions with work. Well, basically, there are two aspects I found about employees' emotion with work. So one is about their emotional feeling triggered by the mediated communication, and the second one is about emotional expressions. So for the first one, well, social technologies facilitate mediated interactions. So as I said earlier, well, emotions with work comes from this workplace relationships. So the uses of social technologies contributed to employees' interactions or experiences interacting with their coworkers. And under this theme, I found two kinds of uncivil behaviors that were mentioned by the interviewees that really brought the negative emotions. So one is the changing communication patterns. Another one is inappropriate uses of communication modalities. So for the first one, well, a very frequently mentioned example is that how employees really hated the non-reply of of his or her messages. So the interviewees shared that they felt desperate, annoyed, and anxious if the coworkers did not respond to their messages online on time. Well, because employees nowadays use those digital technologies really frequently, everybody is online now. So it's impossible that a coworker does not reply to the message in a few hours. So they basically, when they're in this environment of constant connection, they feel that, well, they have definitely seen the message, but they don't reply. So that annoys people. Another related example is about how they hated the uses of voice messages, especially if the expression from those voice messages are unclear or not direct. So basically, this example shared by the interviewee is that she received so many messages that last 60 seconds, and she has to listen to them one by one. And of course, now technologies can help us to convert the voice messages into text messages. She still feel bothered, especially the coworkers could not explain the idea or the messages, the purpose of the messages clearly. So basically, well, this kind of inappropriate uses of communication modalities triggered that kind of emotions employees have with work. Um, well, also, they describe the importance of choosing the right channel. So basically, choosing the right modality for communication is important. Also, choosing the right channel for communication is also deemed as very important for expressing emotions. For instance, this example from a postdoctoral researcher is that her coworker shared a negative comment about the slides she made in the WhatsApp group. And so basically her coworker sent a message in the large group where there are superiors and other collaborators, merely expressing a negative emotion and did not add anything well meaningful to improve the quality of work. So just venting. So according to her explanation, she thought, well, the coworker just wanted to draw attention from the large groups. And usually expressing negative emotions can draw much more attention than a positive emotion. And the coworker wanted to use kind of emotional display to gain influence and to gain certain kind of a power status. However, this kind of this coworker is just a relatively entry-level coworker. So expressing this emotion without a solid ground is regarded as unprofessional. So, well, that basically leads to the importance of choosing the right channel for the right kind of emotional display. And she said it could be better if just the research assistant, this coworker, just shared that comment to her privately, but not in a large group that draws lots of unnecessary attentions. So then finally, in the expression of emotions and in everyday emotional exchanges, I found that, well, employees really leverage and they use lots of stickers and lots of emojis. So, but there are certain characteristics of those emojis. So for one thing, they use existing emojis like a smiling face or crying face, but they are really creative in using those stickers. They also make stickers. They said that making stickers, they can make fun of the coworkers, show, for instance, idealization of their top executives. So they are making CPs. So of their top executives, because they think that they are cute. So they take pictures and they make stickers. And then they create a shared memory of their everyday work life. So these are those emotional artifacts that are created while they are interacting online using those digital technologies. So I call them that those emotional or related artifacts create the playful sociality among coworkers and create positive emotions with work. So as you can see, these are the examples that are used by the interviewees when they are exchanging stickers or using stickers at work. Well, among those stickers used and among the kind of emotional expressions exchanged between among those coworkers, well, they highlighted a keyword called cuteness. Well, they said cuteness nowadays is very important at their everyday work when they're using the digital technologies, because cuteness is power. Cuteness, for instance, can make things done. This editor from a publishing company shared that, well, she kept a positive emotion in the expressions, use emojis and stickers. And this cuteness strategy is beneficial because it's compatible no matter how others feel. Well, I show cuteness in my words, whether you're happy or angry. As long as I can get things done, well, I just want to be cute, and I don't want to show, additional other kinds of emotions. And then I can push things forward, and that's very important. So in that case, also in some organizations, so employees feel that they should change the way that they communicate so that they can express their cuteness. For instance, this example, okay, if you just type okay or hao in Chinese, well, it's regarded as indifference or emotionless. So you have to add certain, small icons like those waving hands, or maybe make it like more verbal communication, like when we speak. So to make it more approachable. And then they use stickers like those okay, and to just acknowledge the recipient of messages or to move the conversation forward. So on the other hand, they also suggested that, well, of course, cuteness is powerful, getting things done, making really a very fun workplace. Cuteness is problematic. So it's problematic because it seems that, well, employees nowadays in Chinese organizations are borrowing a genre of communication that is from the intimate spheres. So intimate expressions can be found, for instance, in the everyday greetings or how they call each other. They call each other little sisters, little brothers, 小姐姐, 小哥哥. Or they use those school-like discourses when they work. For instance, they call each other not colleagues, but as classmates, 同学 or peer classmates. So when you are getting a job or getting a task, it's called getting an assignment. So, well, basically you see how they imagine the workplace and how the values are emerging from this kind of discourses. And one of the strongest criticism I got to this cuteness culture is from this S45, a prior employee of an internet company, expressing how problematic of this kind of cuteness emotions or cuteness cultures cultivated nowadays. Well, she said, I'm not a classmate of my colleagues. My boss is not my teacher. I'm going to a workplace, not a school. We beautify those kind of things, especially those emotional attachment among colleagues, like we have as peers at a school. I have even heard that some companies call laid off employees as graduates. Being a student means that employees should follow orders. Being a graduate means the laid off should be grateful for the decisions made by the companies. And to her, this is a very horrifying logic because it covers up the labor relations, the seriousness, the professional labor relations that should be considered when we think about workplace relationships, and covers up even some problems that exist and making employees trapped in the very cuteness world culture where they cannot, for instance, bring their voices up or to express their negative emotions. And then, well, also some kind of formality is lost in this kind of a cultivation of cuteness culture. So these are the three aspects I found and the three major themes. And through sharing these stories, hopefully you can get a sense of how social technologies are contributing to the emotional experiences of employees nowadays. And some, well, implications of this study. Well, obviously, the social technologies nowadays are not just the tools, supplementary tools for work. They become employees' everyday work. So from clicking and tapping and from mediated communication and from creating a culture in organizations, they play a very important role in shaping a space for employees to work nowadays. So the poor design, well, the design or the quality of design or the quality of the platforms are just as important as the quality of office nowadays. So because employees may attribute this poor design to their organizations, to their employers. And then also because of this advancement of artificial intelligence and smart design, social technologies become a source of information for among employees. So recall the example of how those metrics play a part in shaping employees' emotional experiences. So they can trigger the meaning-making processes or the sense-making processes of employees in organizations. So that sort of points to the importance of how we can understand the role of social technologies. And also, by studying those emotional experiences of employees, we can see, well, the emerging values and norms that we can observe in Chinese or contemporary organizations. The cuteness expressions, the cuteness culture as an enhancing as well as a problematic culture reflect the kind of how social technology play a part in shaping this emotional culture. And then how this cuteness culture is also problematic because it covers up, as one of the interviewees shared, important labor relations in Chinese organizations. And then because I draw on this socio-technological perspective, we can see that, well, this study support the previous research that highlights the importance of understanding contextual influence on the use of social technologies. We can see the very design that enable visibility in some organizations can become a tool for civilians, can make employees to be subjective to more restrictive management. So through how superiors check out who respond or did not respond to messages. So how they enhance the civilians, they can, well, leverage the communication visibility and the communication persistence. So by wrapping up, I'd like to highlight some limitations of this study. So first of all, I only focus on knowledge workers, so I don't focus on, for instance, service workers or other kinds of workers. And of course, the occupations, the industries that the interviewees came from also provides a source of limitation. Mostly they come from, for instance, publishing industries or internet industries, accounting and lawyers and education. So I don't know yet other kinds of knowledge workers, how they experience that. And secondly, well, so in these interviewees, well, they rely mainly on the leading technology platforms. So DingTalk, WeChat, and Facial, those kind of platforms. So I don't know yet how internal tools can also create emotional experiences. And finally, I only draw on interviews. So interviews is a very powerful tool that can give me the insights about actual experiences people have, rather than using those, measurements or survey measures that just use those numbers to reflect employees' emotional experiences. but I tend to, in the future, to further extend this study by conducting a survey, because I can gather more data from more occupations and from people from different places, to look at how emotional experiences with the digital technologies can contribute to employees, for instance, important outcomes, job satisfaction, organizational identification, and their experiences of workplace relationship development. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy if you